Yeah, that's O's partner.
All right. We already waited 2 minutes and the panel's not here, so I'll just start. Welcome to round one. Nami, she, her pronouns, but you can just use gender neutral ones as well. Please feel free to introduce yourself using your pronouns if you feel comfortable sharing them. On the motion, this house will join the network. I want to invite the Prime Minister. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yep, all good.
Thank you very much. Preferred pronoun she, her. Your eyes in the chat, please. Starting my speech in three, two, one. In my speech, I'm going to preview two things. First, I'm going to explain why you're likely to fail, even when you get find out that you have been joining this community. Second, I'm going to explain why, as you, the progression of feminist movement within this kind of area, it's so important for you, and why if you don't join this movement, join this network, you probably feel so much guilt in the opposite counterfactual. So first of all, why you're really unlikely to fail. So in the first place, you are, as InfoScience says, a medical professional, right? Meaning that there are probably a bunch of medical job opportunities outside of this area, right? So thus, even if you get kind of this, if you get criticized within this kind of conservative area, if you think that you cannot you cannot resist anymore, you probably can get out of the community, and then you can find jobs to make your own living. But then second of all, in the first place, I think this network, or this the fact that you belong to this network is very unlikely to be found out, unlikely to be detected in the first place, because I think this network probably operates via like an anonymous SNS, via anonymous SNS. Probably the branches will be oftentimes changed so that people probably won't know the branches. So I think in the first place, the fact that you belong to this community is in the first place really unlikely to be detected. But even if you face some kind of like social repercussion once you were found out, I think this is going to be severely outweighed by your passion to progress the like female rights in this area, right? So this is what I'm going to preview in my second part of my speech. So why is this progression of feminism within this area it's so important, right? Notice that you are a medical professional, right? You are likely to have a bunch of job opportunities in other places, right? But then you choose to stay at this place where ideologically you feel different, and where you're likely to face microaggression through through your colleagues, or through the people through the people who surround you, are likely to be paid lower compared to other places, because this is a conservative area it was a very high likelihood of huge patriarchy existing, meaning that I think the fact that you are just woman probably lowers your wages, right? Even with this significant negative factors, you still choose to belong to this community, to this area, and then you still choose to work and make a living in here, right? What this probably means is that you probably know a lot about how the situation of women in this area is really, really severe, and then you also probably have a huge urgent you feel urgent need and huge severe passion to change the situation for women within this kind of places, right? Unless with this huge passion, you probably are gonna get out of this place. You're probably gonna live a much better life, much comfortable life outside of this place, right? But then and then the fact that you belong here, you probably think that this problem is something that is really, really important, right? Notice that for this person, like, contributing to the problem of reproductive rights is crucial, is crucial, and probably the only way for you that you can uniquely contribute, right? Because first, later, because first of all, I think because in the first year medical professional, right, you probably have pretty much special knowledge about reproductive rights. You probably know a lot about abortion. You probably know a lot about contraceptives, compared to things about female education, or compared to things about fair equal payment for women, right? This area is probably the one that you feel more passionate about, most passionate about, and probably this area is the one that you can provide the most knowledge, right? but then second of all, I think this person likely to think that reproductive rights is like the most fundamental thing. Is the most fundamental female rights in the first place, right? In the first place, right? Because oftentimes within this kind of conservative areas, women are likely to be forced to go into marriage, or the idea of consent is very really like unknown or very really deprioritized, right? In this kind of cases, like within this kind of severe area, women oftentimes get unwillingly pregnant, and then this oftentimes severely hinders a woman trying to achieve the dream, for example, like achieving higher education, or for example, like going into workforces, right? You have probably seen a bunch of cases, and maybe like your friends, or maybe like your sisters, maybe your siblings might have seen this kind of might have faced this kind of situation, right? I think in that case, you probably personally feel that reproductive rights is at the core of is at the core of female not being able to progress forward, right? And that's why I think opposition probably are going to say like there are other ways for you to progress human rights. But I think as you probably engaging with reproductive rights is the only way for you to meaningfully contribute to this area, right? Before moving on, CO, if not
Yeah. Oh, here. What do you think will happen when you're found out?
as I just said, you probably if you think you cannot resist any more of the criticism, you can probably get out of this community. You're probably able to have a job there. You're probably able to feel better in a comfortable situation where there are much more liberal people, right? Okay, what will happen in the counterfactual where you don't simply belong to this network and then you just continue with your job, right? I think even if you somehow engage with feminist movement in some places, you are going to feel incredible guilt, incredibly feel remorse about you not joining the network because as your job is medical professional, you're probably likely to encounter with a bunch of women who got unwillingly pregnant, like. And then when you face this kind of patient, when you face this kind of people, you're probably going to feel that you're going to feel an incredible amount of guilt, because you know that if you might have been engaged with this network, you could have provided the contraceptives, you could have provided abortion and this kind of stuff, and then you could have helped these kind of women in a much more meaningful way, right? But then you think that even though you knew the option, even though you knew how and the method of helping these women, you were into you rejected this idea of helping other people for fear of you facing social repercussion, right? This kind of thing is going to make you feel incredible amount of guilt. You feel that you are not you're not worse feminist. You feel that you're not you're not contributing in any sense towards this community. I think this in a sense of guilt is going to be very very severe. That's why we propose.
Great. I thank the speaker for their fine remarks and would like to invite the LO here. Hello, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Oh, all right. I was speaking. Anyways, hello everyone. Pratyaksha going hello. You can ask me a POI whenever. Just verbalize. Do not heckle. Post 5 minutes preferably. Don't mind my voice. I have a sore throat. Cool. Just setting up my timer. All right. Starting my speech on a self-reverse count of 3, 2, and 1. A few pieces of setup before we start with the major arguments. I think firstly, what actually does this underground network look like, right? Since we do not get any characterization from Prime Minister, and since they're very uncharitable in considering like opposition must have a case, that's not how debates work. But anyways, let's talk about what this underground area looks like or this network looks like, right? One, we think it's not monitored, which literally looks like you have no regulation surrounding it, which means it operates in secrecy and nobody knows about it. Most likely, the government also does not know about it, which means it's like highly illegal at all points. Secondly, we think since it's an underground practice, we think you have like a number of substandard services that occur by virtue of you having, let's say, not a very good space, or let's say having not a lot of like safe equipments or hygiene to begin with. But thirdly, what this underground network then look like is it's largely expensive, right? Which means there's like a lot of issues with the sort of accessibility that you have then. It's simply because an activity is underground, its demand for it, let's say high, as what government tries to characterize. We think it's like largely expensive. We don't think it's like very accessible to like a number of people to begin with because of like virtue of you not like as a woman not wanting to go into an underground practice because of XYZ reasons, right? Which then means this underground area is bad. I think then what is the actor incentive here, right? I think I even ask in a POI as to what exactly happens when people find out when this activity is busted, when your underground network is busted, right? We think as characterized, since it's not it's like since it's operating in secrecy and since like not a lot of people already know about it, we then think that you were at all points in a constant mental strain and a fear of backlash exist. This is a major push from our side of the house. But how big this fear actually is, right? We think that on a comparative, you can still like go ahead and do above ground advocacy for abortion rights and all of these things. But on a like on their side of the house, your personal stakes are being involved. You can even like get like a multiple like backlash regards to this thing happening. But
Point of
first, let's talk
information.
about wait. So yeah, clarification before moving on.
Is it more important to help a rape victim get an abortion for a baby they don't want or be a bit scared of backlash?
Sure. So I think it's like important at all points, but why should this particular actor would not want to do it in of itself? I think the simple wing here is the fear of backlash. Then I think I'll analyze more onto this. I think one, what actually happens when it's found out or when a network is busted? We think that since it's in a conservative area, largely this like rights etc. are not like legalized to a very large extent, which then means that your license might at all points get cancelled. You might face like multiple legal repercussions at all points, which really looks like fines, which looks like imprisonment, and worst case, like getting a license cancelled and all of these things. Why is this important to this actor now? We think one, it like ruins at all points your career and your and or any and all sort of representation and reputation that you had in the past, or like whatever career you had. But second, get like your license getting cancelled like pushes back the feminist movement or pushes back your advocacy and capacity to talk about these rights, to advocate for these rights, and to like be a very legitimate like role model figure for people and people at large for like advocating for these rights, because now you're not credible enough and all of this stuff existing. But second, we think that at all points, this particular actor emphasizes on patient safety and ethical rights, etc. at all points. Why is this important? It's simply because doctors go through like multiple checkpoints with regards to like joining the medical practice in and of itself, right? Which means that you have at all points a sort of
Point of
ethicals and all things existing, which means that you emphasize patient safety over above all. Simply why our characterization, which is the uh, there are not a lot of regulations and monetary network and like mechanisms, we think one, it's difficult to hold any sort of these providers like accountable at all points, which means they're more likely to lead to complications and all of this stuff with regards to like any sort of rights or any sort of medical practice. But second, we think that the environment, since it's like non-sterile, there's like larger chances of like negligence happening at all points since it's an underground activity, which means that you harm your patients at all points, which is something that like goes against the will of this doctor, because this doctor does not want to like lose people. But thirdly, we think that in underground services, you still have like limited aftercare at all points, which means your patients are like more vulnerable at all points, which means that you do not get to like do a lot of like aftercare for them, which means that any medical checkups regarding these things require a lot of feedbacks, require a lot of like after checkups and all of this stuff, which means you're never able to do all of these things because people like patients might not be able to like come so often, or maybe like you don't have a lot of like opportunity or ambit for aftercare, which means it leaves your patients more vulnerable at all points. But fourthly, we think that since it's a conservative in all of these things, you still are able to like in the fear of legal repercussions, all of these women on side government, there's no guarantee, right? Like if like on scale, a lot of people would actually show up at these underground networks to get a lot like all of this stuff, like to get these services to begin with, which means only a few people on their side of the house are like coming to like take their best case to do like avail these services. But fifthly, then why like these doctor does not want to like join would not want to join this is the fear of like exploitation and the fear of unnecessary pressure that like goes through this mind. You think one, you have no control over the sort of like terms of work, etc., because when you work on this underground area and all of this stuff, which means secondly you get like pressured into like unfair practices and all of this stuff at all points, which means like thirdly you're like forced to like make decisions that like go against your like medical like expertise and all of these things. Before moving on, POI opening. 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. Moving forward, then, what's the comparative on opening opposition? You think on opening opposition, the comparative is like you do above ground activities, which are like going to be better for this actor to begin with. You think the actor is the most important person here, which means that on their side of the house, you do multiple underground like activities and getting involved this like dangerous network where you can get your license revoked. On their side of the house, you can save a small number of people probably. On our side of the house, where you do not get caught, where your medical license is still intact, you can still on scale help like a large number of people. I think this is a simple way here. And these like as OG like concedes, the reproductive rights, etc., and all of like advocacy is important for this particular actor, which means your capacity to like legitimately advocate for rights in the feminist movement increases multifolds when you like don't have the fear of you getting caught in a network or getting image tarnished and all of these things. But secondly, I think you have still like safe access to like medical procedures in the long term is something you can still go ahead and talk about. We think then on mental health and all of these things, we think you do not have a lot of mental strain and you can still dedicate a lot of time to your already existing practice and still advocate for change on a comparative above ground on our side of the house. With that, proud to oppose.
Right. I think the a little further frame remarks. I'd like to invite the DPM. You're here.
Oh, okay, I'm audible.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. My speech starts. So, my speech starts. 3, 2, 1. So, like we're strategies to things. Firstly, the risk of joining this community is significantly low, and secondly, even if the risk is significantly high, but still like the helping the woman in terms of reproductive health is a top priority for her. So that's why we should take this motion. But before moving on my like first argument, let me clarify the two things. So, firstly, you don't the quality of the community, like the quality of the service in the community doesn't matter in this debate because this is already high. Or if the quality is really low, but still she can like fix it, right? Wow, how? But firstly, the quality of this community is likely to be high for the cities here. This like community is mainly done by the volunteers, right? So that is why the community don't need to pay the human cost or like the human cost in human material cost in the first place. So that's why they can offer the medical care is significantly lower prices towards anyone, right? Secondly, what is more, so every member are likely to be related to the medical community. That is why they have connection with the supply chain, for example, so that they can easily like secretly import the medical like the material from their own by using their own like supply chain or the connection with their own like the importer or whatever, right? Thirdly, what is more, this community are likely to be funded by the liberal community, including the feminism energy or whatever, because feminism energy or coming from the Western democracy also thinks that the reproductive health is the really most important issue for them because a lot of human rights violation happen due to the the lack of the reproductive health, right? So that is why that this kind of like energy or like the feminism movement inside the European country likely to help this community and fund gives enough funding. That is why this community are likely to give the accessible like the service to each like the woman underground here. Secondly, even if the quality of the service is significantly low, but still like she can change the community inside, right? Why? Because she has she's likely to have the large influence over this like the community. Why? Because in the conservative area, only a few women are educated. Only a few, so that means only a few medical professionals likely to communicate, likely to participate in this community, right? So that is why that her value inside the community is significantly high, and also like she shares a secret with this own community, right? So that's the community want to minimize the probability for her to betray on this community, right? So that is why that if she said that this community like service is severely low, or like the community have to change his services quality, maybe like she can do that, right? So that is why the community service are likely to be improved by her. And thirdly, even if this community is really significantly worse and really worse community, still like she can at least call out anonymously to the government to arrest this kind of the low quality like communities, right? Because if this low quality community is harmful to the woman, right? So that is why that at least she can get the choice to help the woman in also as a paradigm. And so that is why the quality of the community issue doesn't matter in this debate. Secondly, what is more, the opening opposition told that like underground like movement can be successful, but underground movement is significantly difficult for two reasons, right? In the first place, the highly conservative area, this conservative mind is related to the religion or whatever, like the tradition. So it's really, really hard to change it, right? So that is why that, for example, it takes 10 years or like 20 years to change these kinds of things. So but like while 10 years pass, most of the women, many women, your sister, your friends sacrifice their own private life, right? So that is why this is really urgent issue. So underground movement is too late. Secondly, what is more, these medical professions do not have any capacity in the policy making in the first place, right? Because there's professionals of medics, but they're not professionals of policy or like they're professional political activities in the first place, right? So that's why underground like movement are more likely to fail. And secondly, so that's why let me move on to the first argument. Why it is significantly low risk for her to like join this community? Two reasons here. In the first place, the community are less likely to find out. Two reasons for it. The police officer in this kind of area is really, really incompetent or cannot like spend much of the resources on this like reproductive health issue, right? Why? Because highly conservative area is likely to be the developing country. This is very factually true, right? And also in this kind of developing country, or like the police have to deal with a lot of issue, right? For example, murderer. For example, like more terrorists. For example, more urgent like life-threatening issue exists inside this kind of highly like conservative area, right? So that's why police is really under police cannot get access to the sufficient amount of the resources, and the police have to deal with this kind of murder or like the more life-threatening issue. That is the police officer can spend less amount of the money or like less amount of the resources in this kind of like feminism issue in the first place, right? And this is true even the developed country, right? For example, USA or like many developed countries also suffer from the financial gap, which causes a lot of homeless people. So that's why police officers are really busy in other issue. Police officers are less likely to try to find this kind of secret community in the first place, right? And also, secondly, this community is really, really secret, right? Because each member has incentive to select a member very carefully. So that is why mainly the very educated woman, only educated woman participate in the community. So that's what and also like this medical care, it's a small population is involved. So that this is significantly like hard to be found out. And even if it's found out, but still, she is less likely to get significantly punished, right? Because again, this kind of community are more likely to have the connection with the feminism NGO. So that's why she can access to the high quality of the lawyer, or like and also like a lot of media, like CNN or like Western media, try to like have this coverage to sympathize herself. So that's why maybe she can get this kind of protection from the Western democracies, right? And thirdly, what is more, even if it is untrue, but still like a developing country lacks the human resources in terms of the medical care, right? So because the medical care is really life-threatening issue, also the developing country's government have the incentive not to like significantly punish these kinds of women, right? So maybe she significantly monitored, but still she can walk in the hospital in the very near after being arrested, right? So that is why the risk is not that big. And thirdly, even if risk is really huge, even if she have to be homeless while she is found out, but still it's really good thing for her. Three reasons why here. So look at her personality. She already sacrificed her private life for achieving the feminism goal, right? Because look, identifying herself as a very feminist are likely to have she are less likely to have the partner, or she are less likely to have the really friends inside the conservative community. But still, it is okay for her because the feminism movement is really important issue for her. So that's what her action show. That's really being homeless doesn't matter for her. Secondly, what's more, if she like join this community, she can help her friends or like the best friends or like sister if they got the undesired pregnant, right? So because like she knows that which community is very trustful and which community her sister can get the abortion or like the contraception in the first place, right? So that's why she can help that the most closest things they love, right? Certainly, what is more, she can avoid that like self-blaming because like this area she have to reject that providing the such like care on the hospital. So she feel really, really guilty in the first place. So she can avoid that. So they plan to propose.
Right. I think the speaker for their final remarks, I would like to invite the DLO. You're here.
Hi everyone, Malhar he him. I'll take a PI in the chat box. Please don't verbalize. And I'll start in 30 seconds. Hi, ensuring I'm clearly audible.
Yep, all good.
All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, cite government as a whole bench significantly confuses the comparative in this debate. When they ask their POI on CG, if the dichotomy is a rape victim not getting abortion access versus the fear of backlash, this is not what OO case even is in the first place. Note panel that because you are establishing an entire network of medical practitioners who still want to run an underground network, it means that it's not just going to be a small team of 7 or 8 people because you need a lot of capital, you need a lot of connections to even run this in the first place. This likely means that the network is going to consist of like 200 to 300 plus people, which means that you as a person don't play that significant a role in the network in and of itself, right? Which means that the network still exists. People who want abortion access currently and urgently still have access to it, which means that all their claims of a rape victim not getting abortion access simply go out of the window. We say that the network still exists, you still have abortion access in and of itself, right? The comparative then becomes which world gives you better legitimate access, increased access, and safer access while not risking your career and life on the line, right? I think this is where Pratyaksha's premise itself defeats both government benches in the first place, which means that this we are not just talking about like personal security and fear of backlash, but a culmination of that factor as well as where you can meaningfully provide individual like change in society and individually fulfill yourself and give yourself more catharsis. We're going to have three pieces of argumentation. Firstly, on why the network itself is bad. I think Pratyaksha clearly outlines to you why this network is not going to have great quality of services, right? I think all their DPM points just ignore the analysis that exists as LO when we tell you simply that because like you are running an underground network, that necessarily means that you are going to lose out on state subsidies, etc., that significantly reduce costs of abortion in many different countries. Which means if you want to run a low expenses business in the first place, you have to have some sort of cost cutting. But secondly, because it is unregulated and unmonitored, it means you can't have legitimate access in hospitals where you have the amount of equipment to actually deal with abortion cases, which means you have to run in some sort of substandard facility. We tell you that medical practices and procedures are incredibly dangerous to begin with, which means that if you don't have monitoring, all their claims of helping out women simply make it too risky and too dangerous to begin with. Which means as a whole, we think that the network itself is a highly risky gamble to even join in the first place, which means that on a whole, you don't know if this network is going to succeed in the first place. But secondly, their points on supply chains make no sense, because it's not just doctors in supply chains, but you probably need investors or some sort of funding. And if it's an underground chain, it means that the funding is going to be through illegal channels. This is bad because it gives you avenues to exploit. Like, there are exploitative avenues that expose the network, like that are exposed to the network, right? But lastly, and most importantly, just hear their rebuttal out. Police have other stuff to do. I just don't fathom how, like, their idea is that, hey, police have better things to do, makes any sense when literally someday you're like going to get caught by the police themselves. But note, they don't have fiat to assume that there is simply no access to abortion in the first place, because it says conservative area and not country, which means that in countries like the US, where abortion is highly state specific, there is a chance for you to go in different states and access abortion legitimately, if you don't still want to opt for the network that exists side by side. Let's talk about actor incentives then. Pratyaksha already outlines the fear of backlash, right? Which is that, one, community ostracization happens, but secondly, there's a large likelihood that you lose your license, which means that the current people that you're helping out right now you are unable to help them if you do get caught. And even if you don't get caught, this fear of always getting caught always exists in your brain, right? This is bad because on a personal level, just how humans function, sure, you may support some causes, but it's an incredibly larger step to take when you actively want to help out those causes, right? Which is why we think that you're probably going to be reluctant because of this backlash anyways, right? Why does this not occur on our side? One, because you don't feel any sort of guilt when you're still advocating for the causes, when you're going above ground. This is important, panel, because it throws out all their analysis on guilt out of the window from the like outset itself. Why is that so? One, because we think there's more catharsis in still advocating for some sort of policy change to begin with above ground. One, because you have legitimacy as a movement, but secondly, we think that you are able to access long-term societal change. This is important because you can see policy impact and work towards it. We think a problem with abortion is not just accessibility, but also the expensiveness of that accessibility, which means that abortion care plans to set up need state funding. And like, if government wants to increase abortion access, we think that it's much better to advocate for policy change. We think that if there is some sort of state support, it significantly reduces expenses, which on a net scale just increases accessibility much better than whatever the network will ever try to achieve in underground means. Because understand, underground means have limited scope in itself. Before that, POICG. 3, 2.
Sure. So yeah, if you're an activist, then people are going to not like you for like protesting against something that's widely accepted.
Got your question. That's agreed. People will not like you. But here's the difference. The backlash is different because on a fear of like when you do get backlash, when you're caught for working with network, you're seen as an illegal entity. And we think that community just highly has distaste towards illegal bodies way more than, say, a legitimate movement, which means even if you do have community backlash, at least people are not going to significantly hate you way more because it's not illegal in itself. But secondly, we think it's much more cathartic to actually advocate for policy change in the long run. But here's the most important point here. Even if you don't get some sort of policy change, we think this movement is likely to result in some sort of crowdfunding, which means that abortion access, like, you at least raise more capital for abortion access. Sure, it's tougher, but you get more individual fulfillment, you don't risk your life, and you still like are working towards the cause in itself. That's the world which O stands for. Proud to oppose.
Right. I thank the speaker for their fine remarks and would like to invite the GovWhip to close the case for the government bench. You're here.
Am I visible and audible?
Yep, yes to both.
I'll start in 3, 2, 1. it is a bit annoying when you're dealing with an entire opposition case that refuses to engage with the vast majority of the context, right? They want to make and place set this motion in places that somehow are conservative in small areas, that are conservative in the ways that, they still allow abortions, or they don't have laws restricting women's and women's agencies, right? And as a result of that, women like this actor can go out and they can protest and they can act in legitimate political means to climb up the ladder and so on and so forth. I just think that's really insane, right? Because even if you do believe that this might happen in the US, or it might happen in the 3 or 4 first world nations, which are actually culturally conservative, but still have progressive laws, places like Korea, places like Japan, places like Taiwan, places like Singapore, all these places, right, all presumably don't restrict women, and that presumably cuts them out of the context. So where does this motion actually happen, and why is that important, right? Because this motion happens in places like Cambodia, it happens in places like the Philippines, happens in places like Vietnam. These are places that presumably have laws restricting women's autonomy and agency all the way down to how and where they can perform, basic bodily functions. We think it is at this point, when you are constrained by this choice, given no other options, which is something Joshua talked about, no one wanted to respond to, that you then ask yourself, should I act in the interest of performing illegal activities underground? And I just want to, really quickly knock out this idea. You're not building an MNC, okay? You're not having 400 people that all scuttle around and give you pills and condoms. Presumably what this underground network looks like is perhaps an agreement amongst a few doctors that go, maybe we can all like turn one side and book off this one room in the hospital that we all work in so that we can perform an abortion. These networks look like covert things which help women access their agency, right? So when you deal with this context, it knocks out a lot of the argumentation, firstly with CO, right? Because as Joshua pointed out, this thing that they want to claim, climbing up this ladder, is not mutually exclusive, right? It is contingent on the idea that you get caught. Now, again, if you believe that these places happens in the vast majority of conservative places which restrict laws, which are places like most of the Middle East, a lot of Southeast Asia, a lot of just Asia in general, presumably you also believe that these places are oftentimes inefficient. Only look at places like Malaysia, where you can pay off police officers, for example, to turn the other way. Presumably these are people who are incentivized to who are incentivized to overlook this sort of mild form of corruption and presumably chase bigger fish, something opening said didn't actually explain, right? But presumably you also note that closing opposition doesn't actually deal with the duty as a doctor. This is something that Joshua talked about, right? Because presumably your duty isn't just to receive fulfillment as a woman, right? That's just one part of it. Your other part of your identity is being a doctor. Being a doctor means that your duty is to help people as best as you can. What this means is that in the context that isn't the US, where you can't just flee to another state and do abortions in another state, presumably what this means is that your ability to help women make their lives actively better, make their health better, make them have more informed choices, give them contraceptives things like condoms, give them birth control pills. These things that presumably help them are all things that you can actively engage with at a point in which you understand that it is your duty to provide the best possible healthcare, right? It is in this world that presumably you literally can overturn this system, the thing that they so want to talk about, where you get to treat women with dignity, right? Because there is nothing more dignified. Yes, you can be dignified in having a smile and treating women and helping them perform surgeries, but it is also incredibly dignified to help someone get rid of an to abort a baby that is a product of the most traumatic incident in their lives. It is also treating them with dignity by giving them birth control pills so that they can manage the symptoms of having to bring another child into this world. These are things which are more dignified and presumably provide more utility along with that dignity as a doctor, which is equal and important to you. So this is not just an issue of helping women fulfill their needs, right? Or helping women fulfill their hopes and dreams, but it's presumably fulfilling your literal job as a doctor, right? Now, the thing that they want to say then is that, oh, but you can do other things as well. You perform surgery. Yes, you can perform surgery. And that presumably is why it is also not mutually exclusive, right? You can perform your day job while also doing things like, for example, paying off, the police that comes and checks in the clinic, which, frankly, have you ever met a a really corrupt country where like the police come in to check if you're performing abortions. I don't really know, but presumably you can also progress your career while doing this. So presumably, while being able to advocate and literally champion for these rights in the forefront, in the front lines, you also get to climb the career ladder that they so want to claim helps them become better. Now, the next thing that I want to deal with is just talking about like and why they're just completely out of the debate. The entire mechanism here is just going, oh, no, wait, guys, but what we can do is that we can also advocate on the streets. In a place where abortion is illegal, you advocating on the streets makes you a criminal. Presumably, you also go to jail. But now you are visible and more likely to get caught. But presumably, I think the thing that no one really wants to deal with here is just why exactly helping others is far more important than your personal protection, assuming but not conceding that you get caught. The idea here is really simple, right? The question that the debate demands is, should you do the right thing even at the cost to yourself? And we think the easy answer is that for a moral human being who seeks validation from being able to help people in their lives, the answer is obviously yes, even when you get caught. Because the idea here is that your ability to fulfill your moral duty as a human being who is in a position that be available to help these people and help them actively make their lives better is one that you have the tremendous moral duty to actually fulfill. I'll take CEO.
So if you can bribe the police to be allowed to perform abortions, it doesn't sound like access to abortion is that scarce. This is also unresponsive to my mechanisms on why you're afraid of getting caught.
Yes, so abortions are scarce because you perform the abortions. If you do not exist in this network, you do not perform the abortions. So you create the abortions for people to have. And then you go, hey, police, maybe don't come in this room at 7 o'clock, right? Presumably, that is the mechanism for how these like networks exist. But lastly, why is it important that this, like, why does this outweigh the complete personal protection and the fear of getting caught? Now, look, you're going to be fearful anyways. If you're not fearful of getting caught as a medical professional, you're fearful of never rising up the ranks. You're fearful of being sidelined forever as a medical professional. You're fearful of being a woman within the society. The only thing that changes here is that you become part of the solution to actually make these people's lives better. In the absence of this, we don't actually think that there's much change in their world. They want to run this idea of improving their lives through legitimate change. We don't see a mechanism for it. We think they lose.
I thank the speaker for their fine remarks and would like to invite the whip to close the debate. Here.
Okay, hi. I prefer POIs in the chat, please. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In closing opposition, we're not going to doubt that dealing with abortion or the shortage of abortion services in these areas is a serious threat to women. But the thing that we're saying is that, practically speaking, if you are put in this position in this conservative community, the way to save women is not just through engaging in these dangerous abortion activities, but rather to engage in more conventional medical issues, which are significantly impacting women as well. Which is to say that the fact that there is shortage in, for example, women-specific treatment, or the fact that women are put in the waiting line, long behind the waiting line, even as they, for example, bleed in conventional hospitals, or the fact that they're facing a lot of prejudice and harassment in these clinical services. We think that all of these issues are also likely to fulfill your interest and your fulfillment as this person that we're especially talking about, and especially considering the fact that these are areas in which you are more likely to be able to successful, more likely to be able to actually save women in the longer term. We think that this is more likely to be the fulfilling choice that you ought to choose. Let's first compare with the opening opposition. Opening opposition does a good job of taking down the Gov case, dealing with the likelihood of, are you going to get caught, are you not going to get caught, that kind of thing. But O's biggest problem is that even though they explain that you are likely to access some sort of fulfillment on our side, they never explain why you are able to access more fulfillment in our side as this person compared to the government world. And this is where closing opposition clearly comes in. When we explain to you about how there's a significant more likelihood of saving more women on our side of the house, not just beyond the impacts about like saving more patients, just numerically speaking, the fact that you can be a surgeon and save many people like over months or years, or the fact that you're able to deal with, like, for example, women-specific treatments, treatment where there's extreme shortage of people, of like medical professionals to begin with, or dealing with women who are being forced to wait in line, people who are facing harassment, all of these things. But moreover, we provided from our member speaker about the likelihood analysis as to why you are likely to be able to access these things. And this was not just about the fact that in gov side, when you get caught, you cannot access any of these impacts to begin with, which is a very simple reasoning. But the second thing that we tell you is about how if you remain in these areas, and if you remain in the conventional careers in conventional hospitals and advance your career as a medical professional, you're able to eventually save more people, not just in terms of quality, but also in terms of quantity. People who are literally on the brink of dying, but the people that you are also able to literally save with your own hands, which is likely to be significant fulfillment that you are able to access on our side of the house, which means that we're able to clearly fill in the burden that opening opposition failed to fulfill. Let's deal with closing government. But just yeah, let's deal with closing government. I think closing government's case about how you're able to feel a burning sense of mission and become a martyr is going to be significantly like fulfilling is sort of like largely the same as OG, although I would say that there is more explanation with words like identity. What I would say here is largely two things. First is first thing I want to respond to is about the member of government material about how even if you are in conventional medical career, you're likely to be significantly neglected as a woman. We think that this is not likely to be the case. Rather, that you're likely to assume central roles in medical services for a couple of reasons. The first is that there is, to begin with, in these areas, we think there's, generally speaking, a shortage of medical professionals in comparison to the demand, not just because medical professionals are extremely expensive to educate, which means that they exist smaller in quantity, but also because of the fact that, for example, if the social welfare system is not enough or the economy is not working enough, there's a significant number of tens of thousands of patients waiting in line, which means that in comparison to the demand that exists, the supply is significantly short, which means that you're not likely to be, forced to do nursing jobs if you have this medical degree that you literally earned. But the second thing to note here is that I think conservative male doctors have incentive to actively encourage you to work in certain divisions where men, like male doctors, are not willing to work in, like areas like obstetrics or gynecology, or areas which are like low paying or like high burden branches, things like surgeons that we've been highlighting down the line, or areas like ambulance services, which require significant high burden but are lowering pay in comparison, which means that you're still able to access significant amount of medical services, still able to encounter all of these moments when you're able to literally save lives, which leads to your fulfillment. That is the one of the clearly winning metrics that opposition bench as a whole is able to provide. The second thing I want to deal with is about purpose. I think OO is right to say that the question is on which side you can fulfill the purpose more, and CG answers this by saying that you can become martyr even if you get caught. I think that although we will debunk why you will get caught with a significantly high likelihood on your side of the house, on the gov side of the house, what I would like to highlight here is that I think you probably care about like saving more women, like quantitatively speaking, numerically speaking, practically speaking, as opposed to your selfish fulfillment of feeling like Gandhi. And we think that it's very unrealistic for closing government to claim that this is likely to be in the interest of this woman. We think that the fact that this person has been engaging in this social movement, the fact that this person has seen suffering of so many women, it probably likely leads to the belief that you want to save more women compared to GovWorld, as opposed to feeling satisfied as being a martyr. I'll take opening government.
Yeah. So like the government and hospitals, they have incentive to let her work inside hospital if they suffer from that level lack of human resources. So that's why I said that after being arrested, she's likely to be monitored, but still she can work in the hospital. What do you think about that?
Okay, I'm going to deal with this right now. So there's one thing that I want to just deal with opening government, which is the number of people that you can save and the comparison of the number of people that you can save in GovWorld and an OpWorld. There are two things to note here. The first is that the likelihood of getting caught is significantly high, and I think OO does provide some material, but I just want to add a couple of mechanisms, which is to say that the fact that this is a conservative area that stigmatizes or severely punishes these sort of abortion practices, etc., which means that police also have strong incentive to work in line with these social values, or the fact that police of themselves have the individual incentive to get some sort of accomplishment for themselves, for the individual career advancement, probably leads to people having incentive to catch you if you're practicing these things. The second thing to note here is that regardless of this objective risk, we think there's significantly high perceived risk in terms of engaging in these in these underground treatment, which means that you encounter like media coverages of arrests or investigations or religious condemnations that happen in sermons or daily conversations about stigmatizing a woman practitioner that got caught, or the fact that there's significant impact of this of being caught, which is that you literally face career risk, not being facing social stigmatization or religious stigmatization, which means that you are not able to advance a career. You're not likely to get hired in hospital. Your business as an individual practitioner might also not be able to sustain, which means that, and this has two impacts. The first is that the limited number of you are less likely, you're likely to be risk averse and only be able to save a limited number of patients on their side of the house. And the second thing to note here is that these analyses stand regardless of the characterization of the network and what is likely to look like. We think you are significantly less likely to be able to save the number of people on their side of the house compared to our side. Very happy to oppose.
All right, I thank the UpWhip and everyone for a good round. It's just me, so you can stay in this room. And yeah, thank you, everyone.